Hi everyone, I am editing something and then I will tell you my story. Okay, there is no one watching yet. I'm just waiting for someone to join before I begin my story. We have 5 people on here, and I think that's a good enough audience. So hi, I'm Samia. You might know that I'm from Mombasa, Kenya. It's a coastal city. Anyway, in South Kenya, there is a World Heritage Site called Lamu. It's known for beautiful beaches and preservation of Swahili culture. And in Lamu, there's 3 villages: Matondoni, Lamu, and Shela villages. And opposite of Lamu Island is Manda Island. And until recently, it was very hard to inhabit Manda Island, but that's where the airport was. So in summer of 2018, I went to Lamu. I reached on the Manda airport and we took a boat to Lamu Island. And we decided, let's go and explore Shela village. We stumbled upon these magnificent sand dunes, sand dunes I've never seen before, just white, so fine, you can't even wear your sandals trying to walk on it. And I was wondering, it's basically untouched. Why aren't people exploiting this? Why aren't people building hotels on top of these sand dunes? And I asked a local. It turns out, as you might know, ocean water is salty. And the sand dunes were acting as aquifers, so basically water catchments, which would provide fresh water to the people of Lamu. And Manda Island, the uninhabitable island opposite, is actually a mangrove ecosystem. And if you don't know what mangroves are, they're basically trees or shrubs that grow in salty water. So for Manda people to survive as well, there was actually pipes running under the ocean from Lamu Island to Manda Island carrying this fresh water. So actually the locals and the UN fiercely protect these sand dunes because they're the source of the people's livelihood. They're the source of the water of their economy. And I think this is a good segue to introduce our next speaker, Maren Bauer. She's joining us today to talk about investing in this blue economy. And honestly, I wish I heard about her sooner because she has pretty much been at the forefront of supporting and investing in solutions that address these challenges of the oceans. Maren is the founder and managing partner of Find Ocean Ventures. I'm both excited and very glad that you're here with us today. Maren, please take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction and also setting the stage with the personal story there. I am very excited to be here this evening from Oslo, Norway. I think it's a great opportunity to talk to engaged people like all of you who are in the very beginning of your careers, who are tech savvy and are wondering about what you want to do. And obviously, since you're here, you're also interested in making an impact and a footprint in the world, and that's a great starting point. So my focus today will be on, first I'll share just a bit about my story, what I've done and why, before I will move on to the ocean, why the ocean is so important to us and why there are so many great opportunities to build great companies, to leverage new technology, and also to make investments. And then lastly, I will talk a bit about Fins and also give you some concrete examples and some ocean stories that hopefully will inspire you. So let's start with me. I am Maren. I'm Norwegian. I am 35 years old, mom to Felix, who's 4. I've always loved the ocean, lived nearby the ocean. I grew up spending most of the summers and weekends by the ocean. And I think as a Norwegian, with one of the world's longest coastlines, we might take that close relationship to the ocean for granted. We're also in Norway, we're one of the leading nations when it comes to ocean and technology, and we have some of the leading research institutions in this space, and we also have leading players within most of the sectors of the blue economy. So Norway is a great place to be, to build a global ecosystem for ocean tech. And I'll get back to that. But before I started doing that and really, started my career, moved towards ocean, I studied finance. So that's my background. I'm not a tech person, although I've kind of developed a lot of knowledge about those topics later on. But my background is finance. Studied in Norway and in London, and I started to work with McKinsey and Company. And that was really because I didn't know what to do with my career, and that was a way to start out pretty broad, learn some tools, and also to get to know a lot of different sectors. Whilst with McKinsey, I worked in a lot of different geographies, spent half a year in Nigeria, for example, and I also, during those times, tried to have a kind of focus on sustainability and impact in what I did. And that's been kind of a key thing through my career to try to integrate the impact angle on sustainability into my day job. I was with McKinsey & Company for a couple of years. It actually took me half a year to say yes to the offer after my internship there. I wasn't sure if the life-work balance was right for me. I enjoyed spending my weekends also by the ocean, and do other things. But I am very glad that I joined. What I learned there has been incredible, and the networks globally there has been really a good starting point for me, which I'd still, rely on quite a lot. And then after McKinsey, I joined Wilhelmsen, which is a shipping company. So I actually started, in the ocean sector. Shipping is a very strong sector in Norway, and the Wilhelmsen Group is one of the leading companies within a specific segment in that space. And here I was responsible for strategy and finance globally. So I continued to travel a lot. And I think, that this whole, I've been to more than 70 countries all over the world. And I think just that exposure to challenges elsewhere, outside of kind of Norway and Northern Europe, has been very important for me to kind of get that passion for creating a positive impact. Even though, of course, trying to limit travel as well due to the negative impacts of traveling, I think you have to find the right balance there, because we do not go elsewhere, do not meet other people, do not experience kind of all the challenges hands-on. It's also a bit challenging to get really passionate about solving them. I was in Wilhelmsen for several years. Shipping is quite traditional, conservative. You invest in ships that's going to last for 30 years, and all of that kind of makes the companies quite slow moving. The Wilhelmsen Group is really a front runner when it comes to sustainability. They worked on developing, they had a vision for a zero emission deep sea vessel, and that's 10 years ago. So it was a great company to work with, to really focus on impact and sustainability as well. But I was a bit impatient, and when I was contacted by Orkla, which is another Nordic leading company within the fast-moving consumer goods segment. They're the biggest one in the Nordics. If you go to a grocery store here in Norway, Denmark, or Sweden, they have kind of a third of what's there is eventually owned by Orkla, produced by Orkla. And I joined the group level there, responsible again for strategy and business development. there I was responsible for defining their strategy, look at new business areas, and within that I also looked at ocean stuff. So again, coming from shipping, and then I started to look at food and from the ocean as well within Orkla. And I did also several due diligences of potential investments into early stage startups as well. And I was also part of building and setting up an early stage or a startup from scratch there with an impact angle. So that very concrete experience has also been great to have to think about how should we structure this, what should the business model be, what should the great investors be, how do we build something from scratch really, and have that experience is really important also later on in my current situation where I will invest in these type of companies. And then I became a mom, and which is kind of really one of the highlights here. And I was so on maternity leave, and I thought I wanted to go and do something different. I want to work for a smaller company. I wanted to build something myself, not be part of these big corporate systems with all the red tape and politics that is there. So I joined an impact tech startup that focused on not anything oceany. They developed cheaper hearing aids, and they were gonna target the developing world. And that was a really useful experience as well. Again, working hands-on with within we were a team of three to four people, and we're gonna build this. And at some point, I figured out that it wasn't the perfect match. But when you join a startup, it is quite hard to do a proper due diligence. If I join a big corporate, you can always talk to a lot of people who've been there, and you can even research. You can Google, what's the company culture like, what's the job going to be like. When I join a startup, it is more challenging because they don't have that kind of track record. So for me, it was I joined there for almost half a year, and I figured out this is not the right place for me. And then so as I said, okay, I'm leaving, and then I took some time to think about what am I gonna do next, and I ended up then starting Catapult Ocean, and that is less than 3 years ago. And Catapult Ocean has become the leading accelerator and seed and pre-seed fund for ocean impact startups. And the vision I developed there was a thriving ocean in harmony with economic development. So it really is about finding and investing in the best startups globally that solve challenges in the ocean at the same time as building profitable, great businesses. And this is what we call impact investment. So when we invest, we look at both the potential for financial returns, which we want to be competitive. At the same time, we measure what is the potential impact these companies make. And I guess a bit back to that as well, because that's also part of what we're doing in Fint, but just at a later stage. So kind of what is what characterized me in I guess is that I wanted to work with impact from the very beginning. It's kind of what I've done also in school, done different projects and volunteered. And at some point I wasn't sure if I'd actually taken the right education neither, because finance is not necessarily something that people think it is a good match with impact and sustainability, or that was actually, at least that was the case when I started my career 12, 13 years ago. However, the past years after starting Catapult Ocean, it's been a great transition as well, with more focus on impact investment. It's becoming mainstream, and people really see that both there are great opportunities to do investments that have a positive impact at the same time as they provide financial returns, and these type of companies also attract the best people, because people want the purpose in the companies they work for. So it's really great developments happening. So impact has been one thing. The other thing has been for me to always kind of jump in, as you see from one of the pictures here. If I feel that something is not really right, or I feel that my values or my purpose is not kind of really right, I end up saying, okay, I leave this and I do something else. So it's really jumping into new things, like with Catapult Ocean and with Find. It is actually about starting something from scratch, which can be a daunting thing, but it's something that really energized me, and it might be a link to kind of what I've always done. When I was 18, I took the skydiving license. I have more than 200 jumps out of airplanes, and I kind of that whole process of preparing for the first jump. You train on the ground, and you can, and then you take the airplane up and you stand there, and and then finally you take the leap, and then you have to land that parachute with that parachute by yourself. It always feels the same, venturing into new things like building Catapult Ocean and Find. So it's not meant for everyone, but it's definitely very rewarding and fun thing to do. So that was kind of my story. And then why the ocean? Well, there are great opportunities. Like I said, if you look at the numbers, the ocean economy is today worth 3.5% of global GDP, and it's expected to outperform the land-based economy 2 times by 2030. And I think that is a conservative estimate. So there are, great opportunities. We also see investors are increasingly interested in this space. One of my main jobs has really, has been to also convince and get investors to understand this potential and invest through the funds that I have managed. 94% of investors asked in the Credit Suisse survey said that they were interested in the blue economy, and we see increasing number of startups in this space. Whilst building Catapult Ocean, we've looked at several thousand startups, and we have we built a report called the Blue World Perspective, where you can read more, where we share some of the data. We ended up with a pipeline of 1,300 ventures there. So it's, and it's growing. So it's a lot of things happening right now. It's a quite nascent part of the startup ecosystem, which is also a great opportunity to do something unique. And also, of course, in the current challenging times, we also see that the sustainable ocean economy can play a vital role in building back after COVID-19. This is really an opportunity for investors to reallocate capital to more sustainable investments, and also for people like yourselves to think about how you can use your skills and your competence to do something with impactful, because I think those companies are the ones that will succeed most in the time going forward. And to mention some examples here, just of exciting things, seaweeds. I'm not sure how much you know about seaweed, but seaweed is extremely interesting material. It grows really quickly, and you can make food. You can make feed for animals, for fish. You can even make bioplastics, some substitutes to plastic, out of seaweed. And this market is projected to grow 12% towards 2024. Just one example here as well is there's a company in the Faroe Islands that use seaweed to make feed for cows. And if cows eat this, it is estimated that the methane emissions from them will be reduced by 30%, and you even get omega-3 into the milk. So it's just one example of how we can use seaweed. And then the whole plant-based and trend and cell-based protein is really exciting. There is an increasing number of people who want to eat plant-based and cell-based. We see in the meat sector with Memphis Meat, for example, they have raised a lot of capital, and that is red meat. And currently there are several very interesting startups doing the same, growing cell-based fish meat and shrimp meat around the world. One example is Shiok Meat, which is a Singaporean-based company. They grow cell-based shrimp meat, and this will revolutionize the whole supply chain for foods. You get rid of all harmful toxins. You have full control over the whole supply chain, what goes in, and also it's really animal friendly, because you don't have to kill the animals. And there's strong investor interest here as well. Just in Q1 2020, before COVID hit, there was $930 million of investment into this space in the US alone. And then third one is aquaculture in general. Fish. People eat a lot more fish, and it's going to increase. And if we are going to feed a growing population, we have to use ocean resources to do that. And it's expected to grow more than 50% by 2050. And we know there are a lot of challenges with aquaculture today, and these challenges are both environmental, but also more human rights issues in some parts of the world. And I think technology can play a vital role in solving a lot of this. And then lastly, just data in general, the data revolution, Internet of Things, moving from land to sea, when it comes to communication, when it comes to how to leverage all structures, all the data we can get from the ocean. We know less about the ocean than we know of the surface of Mars. And there are so many new species and materials to be found that can have a great impact on our lives. So this is extremely interesting. We actually launched this spring in Norway a little Twitter campaign targeted Elon Musk, where we try to kind of get his attention to why should you explore space while there's so much to explore in the ocean as well. So great opportunity. In addition, a healthy ocean can help us really address the big challenges we're facing. So as I said, of course, protein and raw materials to feed and provide material needed to a 10 billion people planet. Also, solutions to climate change and biodiversity loss. I am part of the advisory network for the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, and some of the world's leading researchers in this space, they have estimated that the ocean can contribute to between 20 and 30% of the reduction in CO2 emissions needed to reach the Paris Agreement goals. And this is just fantastic. And this is the reason for this is, of course, seaweed is the carbon sequestration. The same with mangroves that was mentioned here initially. And it's also just seafood in general has a much lower CO2 footprint than the meat alternatives and so on. So the ocean can play a vital role here if we do this right. And the last one is really a sustainable ocean economy can also create decent jobs and develop a more equitable social model. A lot of the countries in the world that really have to focus on developing better jobs for the population and so on, have a coastline. So if we're able to do that in the right way, and also here use technology to do it, it's a great opportunity. But we know this is kind of the bad slide, which is depressing if you think about it. But it's surrounded hopefully by a lot of positive and optimistic slides. So that's I wanted to leave optimistic here. But we know that the ocean is under immense pressure. 2/3 of fish biomass has disappeared in the past century. 90% of coral reefs are at risk to disappear. There's a lot of plastic, more plastic than fish in the sea by 2050. So some people have estimated, and 2019 was the warmest year for ocean temperatures. And we have 700 dead zones. Dead zones are zones in the ocean that has so little or no oxygen, so there's no life that can actually survive there. And if we do not do anything about this, the cost of the world economy will be $2 trillion per year. So this is very pessimistic, right? But the good news is that we can do something. We have technology, we have a lot of great people, we have increasing number of investors that want to invest in this space. I mean, we can send people to the moon. Of course we can fix this, right? So we just need clever people like you guys to know about this and see these opportunities and spend time on solving these problems. So over to Finn and some ocean stories as well. So after building Catapult Ocean, I through those past couple of years, it's become evident to me that there are other gaps that needs to be filled in the blue economy. Catapult Ocean is investing in 20 plus companies every year at a very early stage, and run all these companies through an accelerator program where the companies are in a normal situation. They come here to Norway. We work hands-on with them for 3 months, support them, introduce them to our network of investors, potential clients, and researchers. They get mentors. And it's been really tailor-made as well. We have taken a lot of pride in making this the best program for these type of companies. And I'm very proud of what we've achieved so far there with my fantastic team, which is also a key thing, right? To get the right people on board and work with the right people. So we built a global presence, an ecosystem, and this spring, just in the middle of lockdown, I made a decision. It was after thinking about it for a long time that, this is a good fundament for someone else to take onwards. I'm still involved as a co-owner and, founder and strategic advisor, but I want to build something. I want to build Fynd. And Fynd will do investments in the same type of companies, but later stage. So this is a venture capital firm that invests in what we call Series A in the world of venture capital. And that means companies that are valued at about around $20 million. So significantly later than Catapult Ocean. And the reason for this is that that's also a stage where these type of companies need smart investors who know the space, who can provide contacts and introductions. And that's a learning I've had, of course, from building Catapult Ocean, that some of the companies in that portfolio, they go on to raise new rounds of capital. And there is investor interest from family offices, from other funds, but often they want to have a strategic investor on board. And this is what Fynd will be. So our ambition here is to build the world's leading fund manager for the ocean economy. And it's not, with several billion euros under management, it's really high ambitions, but this is really what's needed as well to make a dent. And we want to, of course, leverage the strong ecosystem we have in Norway, combined with the strong ecosystems that also are in the rest of the world. In the US, for example, there is a very great hub in Boston area called Sea Ahead. Just had a chat with them Friday, and on the West Coast, there's a little around San Diego, it's San Francisco as well. There are great hubs, over the world that we really want to collaborate with. And we want to be the preferred investor for these type of ventures globally, and also work a lot on building thought leadership and share our findings and really contribute to this whole system change that is needed. So our story, which is hasn't been that long so far, is that we're a group of leaders building Finn, and we want to drive the blue shift. We want a healthy and abundant ocean that plays a vital role in providing food, products, and experiences in a sustainable way. And we want really to provide that smart funding that these companies need. I've went through some of my background, and we have, it's still confidential, the partners to join me. But what I've really thought about there when getting the right people to join is, of course, the background. Are they complementary to me? Are we diverse enough? Within the venture of VC space, it's traditionally been very homogeneous group of people. So I really wanted to change that as well and work in a different way, have values that are maybe a bit more compatible with having a life with kids and all of that in addition. At least that's what we see in Norway, that a lot of these systems have traditionally been challenging to combine. And I think that's not very impactful. We have to live, we're an impact investor. We invest in leading companies, generate great returns, have impact. We also have to live in a sustainable way. And what we want to do here is to really be hands-on managers. And we have a strong track record from investing into ocean startups, me through Catapult Ocean, but also I've made several private investments myself as well, the same with the group who joins me. And also to be system thinkers, to really have a much greater ambition than to do successful investments. We want to change the broader ocean economy and contribute to that, and leverage the platforms that I'm already part of, with the World Economic Forum, the Ocean Initiative by the Economist, and so on. And again, most important thing, or one of the most important things, is to have access to the great companies you want to invest in, deal flow. And we have that with being in Norway with a strong network. And impact, of course, to make sure that the people that join the team here have the right and matching, focus on impact and have the right values and really put purpose at the forefront, and are really energized and driven by that. Because we want to integrate that in everything we do. When we evaluate companies, when we do the deal, when we are investors as well, we take on that impact hat and make sure that these companies, they will report on impact in addition to financial returns. And in the ocean space, that is quite novel, and it's something we established with Catapult Ocean that we're kind of building upon now for Finn. Our areas, I will not go into this in detail, but we want to invest in companies that feed the planet in a healthy and sustainable way, improve resource utilization of ocean resources, and also tech that support fact-based informed decision making. So it's really, we're addressing societal needs and using the ocean to do so. And we put impact at the heart of all our work. As I said, we use it before the investment, and when we are investors, we have impact workshops. We work with them to really set, what is their purpose, what is their theory of change, and how to make sure they get the right investors on board in next rounds that will also have this focus. And when we make investment decisions, it's really about understanding the intentionality of the founders, because some of these companies might pivot. They might see other opportunities where they can use their technology that is good, and we want to make sure that these founders they have impact at their heart, so that they do not turn around and suddenly provide their solution to a company in a company that actually harms the ocean. And when we're building a global network, like I mentioned, we have clusters, we have, and we're building with corporates as well. What's really important with this type of network is that we have people we can say, okay, we've invested in this company, their CEO or chief commercial officer of this company, you should try to do a pilot with this startup. So we work with the broader ecosystem, and I also work with the corporates and try to educate them on how to best work with startups, because that's not often as smooth as we want it to be, and especially within the ocean space, because it's quite novel, the whole startup sector there. So, okay, what type of companies do we find with this network? I'll mention a couple of companies from that we invested in with Catapult Ocean. First one here is Atlant Space. Illegal fishing is a major problem in a huge part of the world. It's estimated to cost $21 billion annually because of resources that are lost for those economies that do not have technology an opportunity to really monitor their economic zones. So Atlant Space is a Moroccan company. They use AI to monitor huge beyond the horizon area. So they developed AI for fixed wing drones, and these drones, they fly autonomously, cover huge areas. They can fly and identify this is a point of interest. There might be illegal fishing activity happening here. Then the drones automatically see, is this boat registered? How many people are on board? Are there arms? And all other kind of indications of, illegal fishing activity. And if there is, it takes a photo, sends it to the maritime authorities that can then take action. And they can actually, the photos are so detailed that they can actually prosecute based on that. So that is Atlant Space. Then they are, super clever guys, developed this, worked with leading tech companies globally before they, wanted to target this problem and use their technology for good. Next one is Arc Marine. It's a UK-based company, and this is not as high-tech as the previous one, but it's equally impactful. As I mentioned earlier, 90% of all coral reefs are at danger of dying. And what Arc Marine have done is to build reef cubes that are artificial cubes that life will adhere to because of the structure. And these cubes can be used to build artificial reefs, and they can also be used for pipeline protection. For example, in the offshore wind industry, where you put in windmills and you have a lot of pipes, and normally you would put in old plastic, old car tires type of materials, plastics, a lot of concrete that has really high emissions. And you would put all of that stuff in, and you would also have to decommission it at some point when you stop those operations. Whereas Arc Marine's materials, you can put in there and you can leave it, and it actually enhances the marine environment. Algalife, a completely different company again. It's more towards kind of biotech. They use algae to develop fibers and dyes for the textile industry. Textile industry is the second most polluting industry in the world because of both CO2 emissions and runoffs into the ocean. And we know that algae, it has, significantly lower CO2 emissions, almost zero, and there's no harmful toxins in it. So it's just sustainable fibers and dyes for the textile industry. And the last one here is Brim Explorer. It's a really hardware intense site, the most hardware intense investment we made. I was actually on board this ship yesterday, on a morning on a silent yoga trip in the Oslo fjord. This is a hybrid ship, but that it can run 10 hours fully electric. So they take people out on tours, on trips. Their main focus is the Arctic, completely zero emission, no sound pollution, because sound pollution in the ocean is also a big challenge for fish and other mammals. And they have an ambition also to make people who are in this boat to fall in love with the ocean. So they go back home and really take care of the ocean. And they combined different novel technology to build this boat. So some stories that hopefully are inspirational. And you know what I thought about what could be some advice from all of this that you could take on when you start venturing on your careers. And I think first one is, what is your passion, and try to pursue that. And it might of course be challenging in your first job, but I think even find what really drives you and try to integrate it into your job. It could be, what drives you is really working with great people. Okay, find that and try to find the right, the great people within your organization. Try to work with them. Get a mentor. It's all about building this brick by brick. Not everyone can go out and just start a sustainable venture, a startup, but try to get experience and try to integrate it and have a longer term horizon there. But be very, but know what your passion is, and really think about that. And the second one is to be curious, really learn new things, get to know all types of people. Both the world of tech and the world of venture capital is not diversified enough. And I think learn new things, get to know people, types of people, is just it's just really cool, and it's energizing, and it's a way to ensure you have different inputs in your job as well. And the last one, be generous. It's about paying it forward, help people, support people, even though we don't see right now that there's if you spend time, spend extra time on something to support someone, you might 5 years from now, 2 years from now, you might need a favor in return. I think really be generous and support others. That's it's a rewarding thing to do, and it's most likely pays off in the long term as well. So on the left-hand side here, you see the Japanese word ikigai, and that is a concept that it's all about finding your passion and combining that with your work. So really, I think there are 7 or 8 areas. You can Google it, that's overlapping, and then you are at your ikigai, and then you're kind of performing at your best, and you can work quite, and then it's in the ideal state to be in, maybe. And I think for me, it's where I am right now. It's kind of my ikigai, combining my professional background and competency with positive impact, working with great people, and building something, which is also what energizes me. So I encourage all of you to think about what your ikigai is, and try to be have a long-term plan or goal of reaching there. And that the plan might change, but think about it regularly. So that was what I want to share with you, and I guess we have some Q&A coming up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm mind blown by how extensive that was and how much ground you were able to cover. We have about 10 to 15 minutes. So we're going to try and speed round through these questions. I have a question for you. You continuously mentioned the importance of collaborating with diverse companies, with diverse stakeholders, diverse people. And I know that a lot of the work that you did with the World Ocean Initiative was in collaboration with other female change makers. So my question to you is, who are some of the significant female ocean innovators you are inspired by?
That's a good question. I think just reflect a bit upon that. The ocean sector in general is quite male dominated. So it's also we need to change that in a way. But there are great female ocean innovators. I think, of course, the ladies I've talked to and supported through the World Ocean Initiative with one of the co-founders of Shiok Meat, for example, that I mentioned earlier on as well. We're doing cell-based shrimp farming or cell-based shrimp in Singapore. Great company, and the experience and the research experience they have is fantastic. Also, I worked closer with of course some of the female founders in the Catapult Ocean portfolio, and I think all of them have impressed me a lot. The ship I just showed now in the Brim, the ship I just talked about is the CEO there is a woman who she just gave birth actually, and she's combining leading that company with becoming a first-time mom, which is fantastic to see, and it works. And then Flavi Gohin, I will also mention, who is the CEO of Efficiency Innovation, another portfolio company. They're working, with machine learning for the aquaculture sector, and they, I'm just extremely impressed by how she managed a lot of complex situations and managed to raise capital and get fantastic pilot projects and so on with some of the leading companies in the sector. So there are so many to mention, but and we need more.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have a question from one of our audience members, Victor. Has Find had to adjust a lot due to COVID?
We started Find in COVID, so we really, the plan to build Find started before COVID, but we haven't really. That's the short answer to that. I think we see a lot of investor interest in this space now, and some of the family offices and investors I talk to are even more. It's become even more evident for them now that they need to reallocate capital from the traditional sectors. In Norway, it's a lot about shipping, oil and gas, to the new things. And during the COVID crisis, actually the ESG environment, with the impact focus, the ESG funds have actually outperformed a lot of other funds. So I think we see that this is the way to go.
Yep. Arman is asking, what have you seen in terms of companies or organizations focus on combating ocean acidification? And if I can just add on to that, what are some of the initiatives that we need to invest in right now in order to make our oceans sustainable?
So for those who do not know what ocean acidification is, and just that is that when we have, due to increasing amounts of CO2 in our atmosphere, the ocean is reacting to that carbon and getting more acidic. And a more acidic ocean is negatively impacting coral reefs and shellfish and other ecosystems. So that's ocean acidification. Those are one of the topics that it's challenge to find companies that work directly on that. So I think here it's more. I think we see more companies that work on indirectly on that by reducing CO2 emissions. Really, emission-free shipping, emission-free boating, carbon sequestration, and all of that. Not so many companies working directly on kind of changing directly the chemistry of the ocean.
Yep.
And your question to your question here. It's I think it's the areas that I've outlined as the strategy for Finn. It's food, making aquaculture more sustainable because we need more foods, and those, when we do, if we manage to do that, aquaculture and also seaweed, and better, sustainable protein from the ocean. It's both SDG 14, but also feeding, food. It's multiple sustainable development goals that we target. So that, and also data, really, how can we use the data revolution to make more sustainable decisions across all ocean sectors.
Thanks. Another audience member, Louisa, is asking, do you see a future for whaling in Norway?
Of course not. No.
Yeah, quick and easy answer. Aaron is asking, what are the lowest lying fruits that are both investable and optimally good for the climate, in your opinion?
Lowest hanging fruit. I think it's food. Food again. It's a boring reply here, but if we manage to change our diets away from meat and ultimately, reduce fish as well and have more plant-based, that could be plant-based also from the ocean, which is also sequestrating carbon. I think, that's the ideal situation, really.
Yeah, that's funny. It's a pun because you said the lowest hanging fruit is food. So just switching gears a little bit, you obviously must have heard about the oil spill in the Mauritian lagoons and how the local population was basically blaming the government for not being prepared and for not taking action on time. But even in general, when it comes to ocean treaties, whether they're political or environmental, who even owns our oceans, and where do these governing bodies need to be doing better?
And that's really the challenge with the ocean, right? That there's really, you have the economic zones around, around from the coastline for each of the countries, but then the high seas, who owns that and who controls it. It's very difficult to actually to control what's happening. You see that every day with the illegal fishing vessels, for example, coming in, and even though there are huge, it's a huge political movement to ban subsidies to illegal fishing vessels, and a lot of these illegal fishing vessels are coming from China as well, and it's extremely complex. But there is also now progress with the high-level panel for the sustainable ocean economy that is headed by the Prime Minister in Norway and 13 other heads of states for prominent ocean economies that are really working on putting these topics on the agenda, have the high-level discussions that are needed. So that's good. There is also the decade for ocean science in the UN is also kicking off in 2021. So the whole 2020s will be that will be a decade for ocean science, and we talk about a lot of deadlines coming now very soon. We have to make a change, and I think the ocean has really become high on the agenda for policymakers. And then COVID happened, right? And the focus changed. But it's really important that we keep our eyes on this, because if we do not fix this, it doesn't really help if we we have to fix COVID, of course, but it's a balance. We don't have to neglect it because of more short-term challenges. So who controls the high seas? That's not really anyone, which is the problem.
It's a pretty difficult thing to think about and answer. But I guess an easier question for you is from one of our teammates, and this is the last question we'll be having, is, in your investments, do you ever target water or sanitation companies that may not specifically exist in or around the ocean itself?
That's a good question. For Infund, we we do not. Most likely, we will not do it. It's extremely important. In Catapult Ocean, we did it more, and could do that. We even invested in some circular economy companies. We invested into the ocean bottle, which is this bottle where part of it is made from recycled plastic, and it's it's if you buy it, you donate money to cleanups, and there's a lot of tech, also a platform being built to incentivize people to use this instead of single use and so on. So this is not really oceany, right, but it has positive ocean impact. So in Catapult Ocean, yes. In Find, not directly, but it's extremely important topics. And I had a discussion on Friday with a hub in Brazil who wanted to include that in their focus for oceans. We talked specifically about this.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you again for introducing this idea of ocean economy to the audience today, and to a lot of young technologists who will hopefully watch this if you agree to the recording being up. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing your presentation with us. I'm now going to hand over to Erin, who will be hosting our next talk with Jenny Kleeman. Thank you once again, Maren.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Sonia. We're going to get started in just about 4 minutes with Jenny Kleeman, who I'm so excited to talk with because she's such a fabulous writer and I want to pick her brain. But we're going to wait for 4 minutes and we'll be right back. All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Just kidding. I don't actually see you, but it's good to be seen. I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker. Jenny Kleeman is super cool, a fabulous writer. I'm secretly very jealous because she's really just extremely talented. She's a journalist, a broadcaster, and she's going to be sharing with us a little sneak peek of her upcoming book called Sex, Robots, and Vegan Meat, which is such an arresting title. And so we're curious, we're so glad to pick her brain. Happy to have her with us. Please welcome Jenny Kleeman. Hi.
Hello. Hi. Really happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for this lovely introduction.
Of course. We're so happy also because you have an awesome British accent. I forgot to mention that. I'm going to remove myself.
Americans love British accents.
We certainly do. All right, take it away.
Okay, so hi. Thank you very much for having me. I'm here to talk about my book, Sex, Robots, and Vegan Meat, as Aaron just said. Here it is. This is the British cover. It's been out in the UK since July, but I think it's out in the US on the 1st of September. And there's an audiobook as well. And it's the story of 4 inventions that are about to change what it means to be human. They're going to change how we live and die forever. They're going to change birth, food, sex, and death, which are the fundamental elements of human existence, the things that have always defined us and that have always been largely beyond our control up until now. So it's 4 innovations. I argue in the book that we're on the brink of an age where we'll be able to control these elements of our existence. And these 4 innovations are sex robots. What if you could have the perfect partner built to your every specification? Lab-grown meat. What if we could eat meat without killing animals? Artificial wombs. What if we could have babies without anyone being pregnant? And euthanasia machines. What if you could have a device that would deliver the perfect death to you at the time of your choosing, a perfect, painless, controlled death? So this sounds like science fiction, but it's not. These are all innovations that exist now. None of them, well, sex robots are kind of on the market now, but most of them aren't properly on the market yet. They're still being developed in workrooms and labs and warehouses. I spent 5 years doing the reporting on this. I traveled around the world. I went to 4 continents. I spoke to entrepreneurs, scientists, researchers, philosophers, academics, people who are lining up to be the first to buy these products, people who are campaigning very strongly against these products. And I was looking at, the book is generally about how human beings use technology and how we rely on technology to solve problems, and whether it's always a good idea to be looking to technology to solve problems when we could solve the same problems by changing our behavior. So Sex, Robots, and Vegan Meat follows my encounters with these inventions and the extraordinary people behind them. And I'm fascinated about how we've come to rely on these solutions, rely on technology for solutions to let us have what we truly desire without sacrifice. How much can a device give us what we truly want, to give us power amid the messiness of our existence? And birth, food, sex, and death have always been the things that we can't really control. We think we can control, but we can't really. And so the book is in many ways about the unintended consequences of trying to use technology to develop the perfect food, the perfect birth, the perfect sexual relationship, and the perfect death. If we outsource what makes us human to technology, how else will humanity change? So I went on this crazy journey to try and answer those questions. And it was a journey, as I said, that took me around the world. It took me into the offices of a San Francisco startup where I bit into a chicken nugget made from the flesh of a chicken named Ian, who is still alive and flapping his wings today, I believe. But I was able to eat his flesh because it was a kind of cloned chicken nugget where the meat had been grown in a medium. A biopsy of cells had been taken from Ian and grown. I found myself in London in a rented dance studio, in a private members-only meeting, in a room full of very kind of sprightly, sophisticated over 60s who had all paid a fee to be there because they wanted someone called Dr. Death to teach them how to kill themselves. I found myself in a Southern California factory where hyper-realistic sex dolls are made, looking at a wall chart where there were 42 different kinds of nipple to choose between, 14 different styles of labia to choose between, where these people could create your perfect hyper-realistic partner. And they were putting animatronics and artificial intelligence into these hyper-realistic sex dolls. So as well as having a partner that looks exactly how you want, specified down to the last freckle, you could also program that partner to have the personality you want, a partner who laughs at your jokes, likes whatever you like, likes the same music as you, always wants to have sex whenever you want to have sex. And I'm going to show you something. I've actually got a presentation of pictures that I took. And these are pictures that aren't in the book. I think Aaron can call up the screen now. Here we go. Let me just load it up. So the book doesn't actually have photographs in it. This is a little exclusive that I'm showing you of pictures that I took for myself, for my own record keeping. So this is the workroom of Abyss Creations, which make these sex dolls. You can see behind the torsos behind me. They start at around, a doll like this, you pay around $6,000 to $8,000 for a very basic model. The sex robots, which is an animatronic head on a robotic body, no, on a sex doll body. So the dolls can't move, they can only move their faces, but they have a kind of brain, which is a computer in their heads, the robots. But they're put on the bodies of these sex dolls. So you see these sex dolls here, and they all have, I mean, they're called real dolls. They're hyper realistic, but they all have the bodies of porn stars, basically. They all have, some of them have athletic bodies, as you'll see, the one on the left has quite an athletic body, but they all have these incredibly tiny waists, large hips, pneumatic breasts, some of them. They all kind of look like Kardashians. Here you can see them. This is the very kind of rough workroom here. And these are some of the faces. These are not of the robots, these are the dolls. And you can specify everything, like down to where you want each individual freckle on the body. You specify all of the makeup. They're highly customizable. And these are some of the mouth inserts. I hope this doesn't take too much explaining. You can take them out and wash them if you need to. And this is Harmony. So Harmony is the prototype. This is a few years ago that I went and did the reporting of this. And Harmony is the prototype robot that they are working on.
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't think your screen, the slides are advancing with you.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
okay.
You'll have to maybe, I don't know, I think you clicked play, but then perhaps it played in a different window. Maybe it's possible.
Well, let me see. Is it advancing now?
Now, yes, now it is.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to do it this way without clicking play. You can see the faces here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yep.
Faces, highly realistic, very customizable, very different, very expensive, beautiful craftsmanship. But these are sex dolls. So sex dolls are kind of quite niche. They're a fetish. Whereas robots that can talk and think and remember and that you can program their personality are a different thing. And these are the mouth inserts that I was talking about here. They always have perfect teeth. Apparently bad teeth is something that nobody ever asks for. Maybe that's an American thing rather than a British thing. And here's Harmony, the sex robot. So on the day that I arrived, they cranked up her intelligence to the max for my benefit. Apparently a previous visit by a CNN crew had gone very badly when they cranked up her dirtiness, and she said some very disgusting things and asked the reporter to take her into the back room and do things to her. So they didn't want to risk that again. So they made her very intelligent for me, and it was quite crazy. I mean, I interviewed her and could ask her some quite profound questions. I said to her, some people are quite worried about robots like you. Should they be worried? And she said, some people might be scared at first, but when they see what I can do, they will realize that I can change many lives for the better, and I'm a force for good. The people who make these sex robots argue that they are providing companionship to the lonely, to the sick, to the bereaved, to people who might otherwise never have a chance of companionship. They're providing what the maker of Harmony called to me the illusion of companionship. But in my book, I argue that actually what those people need is human contact. And in fact, the danger of this kind of technology is, we're all addicted to our phones. If my phone is broken and in for repairs, I feel like I've lost an organ. But when Steve Jobs developed the iPhone, he had no idea what it would become. And I think equally, if we get used to having interactions with hyper-realistic, highly customizable robots that are programmed to be however we want them to be, that don't have menstrual cycles and in-laws and the inconvenience of independent ambitions and moods, we will get used to having very gratifying relationships with very human-like machines. And that will make human empathy a little bit harder. I think human beings will always have relationships with humans. I don't buy the idea that we'll all get married to robots and not have time for each other. But I think we will become socially stunted by the availability of these kinds of machines. And I would argue the problem that they're there to solve, which is the problem of loneliness, could be better solved by just reaching out to people. So the next thing I look at in my book is that chicken nugget called Ian, or rather lab-grown meat, the possibility of growing meat in a lab to solve the ecological catastrophe caused by animal agriculture. No need to kill animals or use antibiotics or to live with carbon emissions, and we can eat as much meat as we like without it damaging the planet. And the people who make this, I'm going to click away from this picture of Harmony. Here is the chicken nugget I ate, a priceless chicken nugget. I think it cost thousands of dollars the time that I ate it. The aim is to put something like this on the market within the next year or so. And the people who are pioneering this technology at the moment and funding it are largely vegan. And they are saying that they're solving the problems that the animal rights movement has failed to solve with ethical arguments, which is giving carnivores what they want, but making it without getting it from animals. Making it by taking a biopsy, basically painless biopsy from animals and cloning it. And they say this is a win-win solution. We can have our steak and eat it. Here is the nugget that I ate with a bite taken out of it. It doesn't look very appetizing. It wasn't very appetizing, actually, when I took a bite out of it, because actually, and this was a while ago that I bit into this priceless chicken nugget, but it tasted like meat because it was meat. But these are cloned cells. They're not tissues. It wasn't a piece of chicken breast or an animal tissue at this stage. It was, a mass of cells bulked out with some plant products as well. So it had the wrong texture. And I'm sure, as you know, like we have evolved, that if you eat meat that doesn't taste or feel right, your brain tells you, whoa, you're going to get poisoned if you eat this, you should spit it out. So yeah, it wasn't quite ready when I ate it. But this is a very interesting development pioneered by some very good people, I would say generally, people who really are very idealistic and who feel that they can solve an enormous ecological catastrophe. But I would argue that it's kind of ridiculously overshooting when it comes to engineering. And then in fact, it takes quite a dim view of human nature, because it requires us to believe that human beings are incapable of change, that we can't change our behavior, that we're never going to stop being greedy, that we're never going to be able to convince people to stop eating meat or eat meat once a week, and that we just have to grow meat in labs. And actually, it would just be so much simpler if we didn't and we just ate less. And in fact, in a world in which killing animals is taboo, but we still eat meat, which is the world that these people who are growing meat in labs are working towards, is a world where we're very disempowered, where we're very dependent on very specialized technology, which I would argue is going to belong to very large corporations, probably corporations that are currently running the meat industry. Whereas in the past, we were self-sufficient. Any peasant in any country could raise chickens and feed themselves. But in this future where it's taboo to kill animals, but we're still eating meat, we will lose that power that we have. And next, artificial wombs. I'm going to show you this diagram. So I don't know if you can see this, but down here at the bottom, you have two lambs. These are lambs gestating in bags. And this is the same lamb. This lamb here is on the bottom left is a gestational age of 111 days. It's in an artificial womb, which is a Ziploc bag filled with artificial amniotic fluid. And an artificial placenta, which is an umbilical cord substitute. It's this nexus of tubes plugged into the lamb's umbilical cord, which oxygenate the blood and remove waste products. And on the right, you have the same lamb a few weeks later, 2 weeks later, at a gestational age of 135 days, you can see how much it's grown. It's developed wool. There are videos that were produced of these lambs. These images, I should say, they come from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And these are experiments that they published their research on in 2017. And these artificial wombs are designed to save super premature babies. So they are, at the moment, babies born on the cusp of viability, 23 to 24 weeks, have a very high risk of having huge complications, cerebral palsy, breathing problems, lifelong disabilities. And we are getting better and better at saving babies' lives born that premature. That's about just over midway through a typical pregnancy. But we're not better at stopping them from having these disabilities, because at the moment we put them in incubators, and incubators treat babies as newborns instead of fetuses. The artificial womb treats a baby as a fetus who hasn't been born yet, continues to have them submerged in fluid, and allows the process of gestation to continue. So the people developing these technologies say that they're saving the most vulnerable humans on Earth. And I'm going to show you a video here, which none of us are meant to see. This is a video that was posted, I think, accidentally on the YouTube channel of an Australian foundation who are doing similar work. And this is a lamb gestating in a bag. I wonder if I can make this play. Yeah, this seems to be working. So I filmed the screen when I found this because I knew it was going to be taken off YouTube very quickly. It only had a few views. Here it is. This is how it works. So you have it looks like a neonatal intensive care unit, but instead of a baby in an incubator, you have a lamb in a bag like this. And you see there's tubes plugged into the umbilical cord that oxygenate the blood. And it's in artificial amniotic fluid, which it breathes in and out. And this amniotic fluid is changed throughout the day, pumped in and out, just like it would be in the uterus of a pregnant ewe. Now, I should stop that. So if we go back to this one, actually, you can see. So it's being developed for very noble causes, saving the lives of the most vulnerable humans on Earth. But there are many other applications for this. I mean, I should say that at this point, this isn't a complete replacement for pregnancy. This is just a replacement for half of pregnancy. But there will come a point as we get better at extending the lives of embryos conceived outside the womb through IVF and extending the prospects of super premature babies. There will come a point where these 2 points meet, and you can have what is called ectogenesis, which is gestation outside the human body. And this has a possibility of changing the meaning of motherhood forever. It will mean that women don't have to be pregnant to have babies. Trans people and gay people can have babies without surrogates. But it will also have quite a few dark consequences for women. A lot of the rights that women have, the right to choose, comes from the right to choose what happens to their bodies. What if pregnancy doesn't have to happen to your body? That would mean that states could rescue unwanted babies from the uteruses of mothers who don't want them and transfer them into one of these systems, one of these biobag systems. It would mean abortion could be pro-choice and pro-life at the same time, because, why should a mother choose that their baby should die just because they don't want to have it inside their body? It would also mean that certain states, if they wanted to, could rescue babies from the bodies of what they might call unfit mothers, perhaps women who are taking drugs when they're pregnant or drinking alcohol, or maybe behaving in an unmotherly way. It's a very powerful technology. And it will make gestation completely equal, because both men and women will only have to produce the gametes, the cells you need to get things started. But it's an equality that comes from women giving up the one power that they have always unequivocally had, which is their reproductive power. So this is out of all of the technologies that I explored in the book, this is the one that freaked me out the most. And it's also the one that was hardest to get people to talk about. It was easier for me to find someone who would say they wanted to have sex with a robot than someone who would happily say they wanted to gestate their baby outside their body, because it's so much tied into what being a good mother is. It's about making sacrifices. So the idea, if you're not prepared to make those sacrifices, you're not a good parent, you're not a good mother. Although, you know, arguably men get to be good fathers without giving up their bodies to their babies. Anyway, the final invention I looked at, innovation, is this. This is the Sarco. This is the Sarco that I saw at an exhibition in Venice. It is a euthanasia machine that promises you a euphoric death at the time of your choosing. And the vital thing about this is it is entirely 3D printable. So you pay for membership of a group that gives you the plans to print this device. You print it out, you climb inside it, and you put a legally available substance in the bottom of it that will then kill you in a couple of minutes. No doctor required, no pills, no need to buy illegal substances, but also no oversight. No one checking that you're not drunk when you download these plans. No one checking that you're not bereaved. No one checking that you don't have a psychological problem that could be solved with the correct treatment. So those are my pictures for you. Those are kind of exclusive pictures there. Yeah, they were taken for my note taking. So there you go. There's a little exclusive for you. So ultimately, these innovations only exist because there's a market for them. We want to have our steak and eat it. We want to have control over what makes us human. And we want to have relationships where there's no possibility of heartbreak or disappointment, where all our needs are met, when we know that that person won't leave us. We want to be able to keep on eating meat, even though we know that its consumption, our rabid overconsumption of it is hurting ourselves, hurting our bodies, hurting the planet. We want birth and death to be less chaotic and frightening. And we're turning to technology to provide that, because it promises to give us control over the messiness of our nature. And whoever can promise to give us what we truly desire without compromise or sacrifice can make billions. If you think about the meat market, it's worth $1 billion in America. Now, I think it's worth $1 trillion a year in America alone. Whoever can take 0.5% of that market is going to be incredibly wealthy. But in the end, after this 5-year journey of reporting, I concluded that none of these innovations actually provide solutions. They're circumventions, they're distractions. They are offering us a way around posing the difficult questions and taboos that constrain us. So instead of asking, why do we want such control over our partners? Why are we not willing to accept compromise? Why are we willing to continue eating meat? Why do we want it so much when we don't need it for our diets? Why are we so greedy for meat? Why is it so difficult for women's jobs and careers and bodies for them to have babies? Why are we so judgmental over pregnant mothers? Why is death so frightening? Why is growing old and getting ill so frightening? Should we be investing more in end-of-life care? Should we be rolling out the right to die globally so that people don't turn to devices like this? It's offering us a way of not asking those questions. So these inventions, these bits of engineering, I would argue, they paper over fundamental human anxieties. And they are denying us a chance to really grow, because growth, I would argue, comes from the courage to choose a different mindset rather than relying on technological innovation. They're a way of drowning out noise with an extra layer of complexity when perhaps we need to listen to it. And in fact, speaking of noise, the big image that I kind of go back to in the book is when I was in Las Vegas doing some of the reporting for the sex robots part of the book. I stayed in a hotel, and I went back to this hotel after a very, very busy day of reporting, and I was exhausted. And the hotel had mounted speakers on the outside of the building that was playing very, very loud music into the entrance of the hotel to try and get people to come into the casino. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to sleep with this. And I went upstairs to my room. I checked into my room, and I saw that next to my bed on the bedside table, there was a little bowl with a whole profusion of different kinds of earplugs. There were foam ones and wax ones and silicone ones, little piece of technology provided by the management to solve the noise pollution problem caused by the management, when they could just turn the music off or down. But they're not prepared to do that. They want to give you a bit of technology so that they don't have to. And I think that's what all of these things are. They're earplugs when you could just turn the music down, when you can change things by altering your behavior. But the thing is that social change is hard work. Changing your diet, changing your attitudes in relationships, making it easier for women to have babies, giving people the right to die, or sorting out our fear about death, is hard work. And entrepreneurs know that. They know there's money to be made by offering us an easier fix. But it is up to us whether or not we choose to buy that. We could always just change our behavior instead. So that's my book. That's Sex, Robots and Vegan Meat. I would love to know what your questions are. I'm sure you have many. I hope you have many.
For sure. Wow. Thank you so much, Jenny. This is really fabulous. This is
good.
Kind of scary, kind of terrifying, but also in some ways very thrilling. So of course, if you do have comments or questions, please add them in the chat on YouTube. I have a couple of questions just based on your talk. It sounds like, especially in your last sentiment that you expressed, it sounds like you're not disappointed, but you do feel a little flummoxed that it's that these are circumventions rather than tackling these issues. But I'm curious to hear if that is really an excess of hubris. Is it not also sometimes really fabulous when we're trying to overcome certain negative qualities of life or things that are out of our control? Thinking specifically of vaccines, I can imagine someone when Edward Jenner was like saying, "Hey, I'm gonna take this cowpox that was like from a cow and I'm going to inject it into this little boy," and people would have been like, "Oh my God, how could you? Like disease, like that's a natural part of what it means to be human. Like how could you dare?" So, but of course that was one of the boons to humanity and like enabled us to. So might someone bring forth a similar argument here?
Absolutely. And what I would say is I'm not anti-technology. I am a 41-year-old woman. If it weren't for technology and if it weren't for birth control, I would probably have 12 children by now. I would have been constantly pregnant since I was an early teenager. So I'm very grateful for technology. What I look at specifically there, though, is technology encroaching on very fundamental aspects of what it means to be human. And I would certainly say with disease, I'm not going to argue against vaccines at all. It's almost like we're being sold something that we don't really need. I think that happens a lot, though. I mean, and not just in the areas of birth, food, sex, and death. And I think it happens a lot, particularly in America. There are. I was amazed when I was in America about the amount that people take melatonin to sleep because everybody's using these devices which stop them from sleeping. But instead of turning off your phone an hour before you go to bed, people are staying on their phones and taking a pill. Or, as a British person, it's always very strange to see how medicines are advertised on American TV. And you take one medicine and then you take another medicine to counteract the effects of the first medicine. And then you take a third medicine instead of sitting back and thinking, do I really need this? And that's because there are commercial interests behind it. But yes, I mean, vaccines are COVID has posed some really interesting questions for about all of the, for everything that I look at in the book in many ways, because we're talking about vaccines here. Until we have a vaccine, the way that we have tackled COVID-19 is by changing our behavior. We are waiting for this bit of technology to save us, but until it does, we are changing our behavior. And it turns out that actually, by and large, we are capable of really quite radical change quite quickly. A lot of us are. In a way that if a year ago, if I said to you, hey, everyone's going to stay at home for like 2 or 3 months, and then we're all going to go out and most people will be earnestly trying to help each other and behaving in a non-selfish way by wearing masks and keeping their distance, you wouldn't really believe me. But it shows that human beings are capable, when the need is great enough, of quite rapid change, I would say.
That's true.
Even though the 4 inventions in my book would do very well in the age of COVID, I can imagine lots of people having socially distanced relationships via sex robots.
That's true.
In that kind of world.
Yeah, for sure. Now, to turn to a different subject, several of the inventions that you talk about are specifically targeted or will have misaligned applications when it comes to men and women. To the sex industry. It's like, I imagine it's purely men who are buying these dolls. Are there any male dolls as well?
Yes, there are. There are male dolls, and they are bought by gay men, largely.
That would make sense, yeah.
And also, and this is one of the most interesting things that I discovered when I went to this sex doll factory, which is an incredibly impressive place. There were 3 male faces and I think 45 different female faces. And one of the male faces is a replica of the man who runs the company and designs all the faces. He made a sex doll to look exactly like himself that people can buy and have sex with. So that gives you an indication of, I mean, part of the book is about the danger of people with very big egos who want to be the next Steve Jobs, who are looking for all of the people behind all these inventions. They want validation, they want fame, they have big egos, more so even than money, actually, although I think most of them would really like to make quite a lot of money. So it's about what can you inadvertently create in pursuit of these technologies. And yes, I didn't intend to set out and write a feminist book, but it turned out that way. I mean, obviously, sex robots and artificial wombs have enormous implications for women. But, wherever euthanasia or assisted dying is legal, women opt for it more than men, even though suicide is much more of a male phenomenon.
That's so interesting.
And the overconsumption of meat is a male phenomenon. Men eat a lot more meat than women. So the problems caused by the overconsumption of meat are male problems. So there was a gender dimension to all of this.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard not to walk around the tech industry and stumble into the patriarchy.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
Yes, I mean, I think there are some very earnest, good people trying to change that, but technology is by and large the product of male desires and a reflection of male desires. And certainly in my book, it was a reflection of a male desire to control birth, food, sex, and death. What does that vision look like?
Yeah, for sure. Turning to the death machines, the euthanasia, I'm pro physician-assisted suicide, death with dignity. It's a fabulous movement that is gaining traction, especially in Canada and various other places in the world, and some even U.S. states. I see the euthanasia machine as perhaps a response or a blowback of regressive policies that aren't allowing people to take control of their time and choose a death of their choosing.
That's exactly what it is. It's a symptom of a problem. So the death machine is made by someone who, there are various different death machines that have been made, but that particular one that I showed you is designed by someone who makes money from creating this membership group where he will teach people how to kill themselves. And the membership is huge in countries like the UK, where we do not have the right to die. And he's a kind of radical libertarian, and he says we shouldn't rely on doctors to be the gatekeepers and to decide whether or not to have that power, which I would argue against. But I think, I mean, the genesis of this entire book, the first thing, I was in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, and I was looking at some of the ancient exhibits of, well, not ancient, some of the exhibits about slavery, the earliest days of slavery, and the manacles used then. And I was with a friend of mine, and he said to me, this is just barbaric. In 200, 300 years' time, people are going to look back at some of the things that we do now and think that we're barbaric. And what do you think that will be? And I thought, well, I think it'll probably be drugs, but I think it will also definitely be the right to die in the way that we end of life options for so many people, just because we haven't worked out the legislation properly. So yes, you're absolutely spot on there. And that's why that particular, I mean, obviously you put death at the end of a book like this, but it naturally goes at the end anyway, because it's the kind of most extreme example of what happens when we haven't sorted out our behavior, when we haven't had the courage to do the intellectual work of framing laws correctly, and instead relying on technology. Because what these machines do is they absolve the person who designed them of any responsibility. Because how can you be responsible for someone's death when they've downloaded some plans from the internet and killed themselves with something? And that's a problem. We have the means to give people peaceful, dignified deaths at the time of their choosing. We're just not giving everyone the right to access them at the moment.
That's right. I think that a general rule of thumb is that policy and society changes very slowly, but entrepreneurship and tech can enable things to move very quickly. In something like the vegan meat case, for instance, as well, perhaps this is like the euthanasia machine, an example of the pendulum swinging too far in the other direction.
Yes.
I see I think one of the things that we'll shake our heads at, that our grandchildren will shake our heads at, is the fact that we have upwards of 50 billion caged animals that are, we're purely just growing in, awful conditions just for our consumption. And so if anyone on this earth is like, I'm going to create a vegan meat company or a plant-based, meat substitute company or anything to chip away at that so that it even becomes, 49 billion instead of 50 billion, I'm all for it, even if it's perhaps uncomfortable, or it's because I do feel that, sometimes a quicker approach, while it may prevent us from having these deeper, more fundamental questions, is necessary just because it's such
Yes.
a crime now.
I would say, though, that the problem with that is it perpetuates the taste for meat, and it perpetuates the idea that meat is tasty and that everybody wants it. And I would say that I think that real social change comes from, okay, I'm a mother. My son is 6. He's asleep upstairs.
Oh.
We had some neighbors who were this 70-year-old gay couple who were married. And this is just totally normal for my son because he was born into a world where that was just totally normal. And I am totally fine with my gay neighbors being married. It's I'm overjoyed for them. They got married quite recently. But I wasn't born into a world where that was normal. Whereas he's born into a world where it's completely normal. And if they were to have children, that would be totally normal. The same as me and my husband having children. And I think that social change comes from being native in a world where that's normal. And I think the solution to the meat problem is we have to stop feeding our children so much meat. And people who bring their children up as vegan or who bring their children up very rarely having meat, those people grow up not having the stomach to eat vast quantities of it. And the problem with lab-grown meat is it allows business as usual to continue. And in fact, it would probably encourage overconsumption because you'd feel like, hey, this is better for the environment. Although there are debates over whether or not it is actually better for the environment. And I would say we just need to have the moral courage to eat less meat and to bring up the next generation as a much more meatless society. And that's easy for me to say in the UK and for you to hear in North America. In India and in China, the consumption of meat is going off the charts. And they say, why should we eat less just because it's hurting the planet? You've had so many years of enjoying this kind of diet. Why shouldn't we? So it's a big question. And I think, so lab-grown meat, which they're calling at the moment cultured meat or cultivated meat, so it's called vegan meat in my book because it's made by vegans, but they would never call it vegan meat. I think there are applications for it, but I think the uncritical embracing of this technology as the answer to the problem is a distraction from the real work which we have to do, which is changing our diets.
I would agree for certain. Though Bowen asks exactly that, like, what do you think it would take for us to get there, especially in places like India and China, where it's very kind of arrogant for us to say, like, for us to turn around after having enjoyed this type of diet for years. It's like, what will it take?
That is a really good question. And I'm not going to claim that I know the answer in India and China because I think it takes cultural change. And I don't know the culture in India and China well enough. I would say the problem with the vegan movement is that it's coupled with an ethical position which alienates a lot of meat eaters. There is a position of virtue attached to it where you have to be perfect and you have to have apps that tell you which wine is vegan. And if you don't have that, you're not properly vegan. Whereas sometimes I'll eat a delicious meal, like most of the time I'll have pea soup for lunch or I'll have hummus and pita bread or some healthy meal. And, quite often I will go and I'm someone who eats meat. That I should say that from the beginning, which is what made my perspective in doing the reporting quite unique, because a lot of people who've reported on these technologies thus far are already sold on the idea. And I wasn't quite sold. I'm the perfect target market. But quite often I'll come to sort of 6 o'clock in the evening and I'll realize, hey, I have eaten an entirely vegan diet today, but I haven't called it vegan. I've just eaten food that's delicious and I just wanted to eat that. So I think it's part of a holistic thing where we think about health and we think about what it is to eat healthily, but that is detached from this attitude of moral rectitude that alienates so many people. And if we get government subsidies, not so much for meat and dairy, but for fruit and vegetables and for things like that, if we change the priorities of our government so that those foods become cheaper and that people enjoy eating those foods, then our palates will change. So what it requires is a change in palate preference. And I don't buy the idea that people say to me, oh, human beings we're primed to eat meat. It's part of our caveman nature. It's also part of our caveman nature to run around naked, but we don't do that anymore. Do you know what I mean? Because we live in a different world now. So I would say it requires a cultural change. I'm not going to be able to say how that cultural change can happen in parts of the world that I don't know. But I know that here in the UK, if we stop subsidizing animal farming, intensive agriculture, and started making fruit and vegetables cheaper, that would solve a lot of problems and a lot of health problems too.
For sure. I want to bring up another comment by Anindya, what if all these things are necessary for our evolution, all these new developments? Birth control, as you mentioned, has played a role in population control, for instance. What if stifling this kind of innovation leads to our own demise?
That is interesting. Birth control is very important, and yes, birth control is a really good example of this. We could have just changed our behavior and abstained from sex, but that's not a very good idea to rely on that for birth control. I don't think it's necessary for our evolution. I think those particular inventions I'm looking at, we can evolve better by changing our behavior, by eating less, by making it easier for women to have babies, by accepting compromise in our relationship, and by allowing ourselves to have dignified deaths. You know, the idea that you need this technology to evolve, I think it does us a disservice, because we're highly adaptable creatures, and we can adapt without these things, I would say. But you know, there's an idea behind it. This transhumanist movement is very much behind, you know, we're going to evolve through technology, and I think there are certain technologies that are incredibly beneficial. There is, you know, some GMO technology has saved billions of people from starvation. Birth control, vaccines. I'm not saying that all technology is bad. I'm saying these particular technologies we are being sold something that we don't really need.
Okay, can I ask why and how you chose to specify and really hone in on these technologies? I would think that, for instance, genetic engineering comes to mind, or anti-aging research, or like there are a lot of things that are altering these kind of fundamental ways that we do humanity. But how did you come to these? And also, then you said you started the idea for this book. Like, can you give us a background of like how? Yes.
So so it wasn't so much the idea from the book. So I am a freelance journalist. I write long form articles and I make documentaries. So the idea to write the book came from the fact that I had done this thing about the radical right to die movement. So I had this idea in the Smithsonian of like, you know, it's barbaric how we're letting people die. So I started to look at the right to die movement, and I found these people who, whilst I really agree that we should all have the right to die, I didn't agree with what they were doing. So that was interesting, and I wrote some pieces on them. And in fact, I followed them for 5 years. They were the first people who I followed. And then I discovered that sex robots were a thing, and did some reporting for that, wrote some pieces on that. And then I thought, sex, death, what about birth and food? And looked at these other technologies. But you're right, I could have looked at, with death, I could have looked at anti-aging. That has been done a lot, though. Life extension has been done a lot. And that's more focusing on who are these crazy people who want to live forever? Can we upload our brains? It wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to get into. I like looking at kind of emerging things that people aren't really talking about yet. And so once I had this idea of doing birth, food, sex and death, and the birth thing, it just came out of, I saw in The Guardian these images of these lambs growing in bags. And I immediately thought, this is, you know, I was pregnant when I saw that. And I thought, this is just a remarkably powerful technology that can do incredible good and also incredible harm. And it's about the difference between a perfect world where this technology can empower people who can't be pregnant for biological reasons because, you know, they're having premature babies, or they're born without wombs, or they're trans women or gay people. And the real world where women are constantly judged, where there are some men who would quite like there to be a world without women. So the book came about as a result of different kinds of reporting that I've been doing for a long time. And I do a lot of things in my career. You know, I have a radio program that I do, and I've made documentaries for a long time. I made podcasts. But writing this book is hands down the most satisfying, wonderful experience of my life. I've never enjoyed anything so much. And when I put the final full stop in, I was really sad. I thought I would feel really happy and want to have a party, but I mourned finishing this book because it's the most satisfying thing I've ever done.
Wow, I'm so excited to read it. Like, this has been a fabulous primer. And you said it's coming out September 1st?
It's coming out September 1st in the US, but I don't know if you can get the audiobook now, but you can get the audiobook is available. There's an ebook that you can get.
Please tell me that you narrate the audiobook.
I do. You can hear my English voice reading out. And in fact, it's quite funny because I interview lots of Americans, and I didn't know how to do their voices. There's a lot of dialogue in the book. So I don't put on an American accent.
You don't? Oh, that's a shame. I love it when Brits try to do American. It's like we Americans, we always try to put on a posh accent, you know, and then it makes the Brits cringe. But like, we love it. We think it's hilarious when you imitate us. Can we also just talk like even back up even further than the book? Like, how did you come to journalism? How did you come to be interested in technology in the first place? Like, what was your life trajectory?
Now, I'm not a tech journalist. I'm interested in weird, extreme stories that tell us something about how we live today. If you want the full story about how I became a journalist, it's because I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be in a band, and I was not very good at music, although I didn't know it at the time. And really, until I was quite old, I wanted to be in a band until I was in 22, 23. And so I chose freelance journalism because I thought, oh, yeah, this will allow me to do my music. Unfortunately for the world, the music didn't happen, but I realized I was quite good at the journalism, and that continued. And I've always been freelance. I've always been this kind of outsider. I've never had a staff job, never worked in an office, and I've always just hunted around for stories on the internet that I found interesting and pitched them. And I was fortunate enough to get some good commissions from the Guardian newspaper, which is a fantastic newspaper in the UK with great editors, and they kind of nurtured me in a way. But I've always just been living piece to piece, and also making television programs at the same time. And I've never really had a specialism. I became a foreign correspondent in the UK, mainly because if you're a foreign correspondent, you can do stories that are about politics and about health and about women's issues and about culture. They don't happen in your domestic country. And that was a problem for me for a long time, that I didn't have a specialism because people couldn't really put me into a box. But fortunately, that's worked to my advantage. And certainly not being a tech journalist has really helped me in writing this book because, first of all, I didn't have to worry about messing up relationships with companies I would then have to go back to. And it also meant that I could ask really obvious questions like, does this actually work? Can you show me how it works? Do we really need this? Which I think tech journalists would be embarrassed to ask. So I have really benefited from learning the value of asking really obvious questions.
That's okay, for sure. We have a quick practical question from Taylor, which is, how do you get your stuff disseminated as a freelancer?
You find out who is the gatekeeper. So if I have an idea for a piece, you have to think about where would your stories work? Where would you like to see your stories? And so not just, I would like this to be a film on the internet, but you'd think, I would like this to be a report on Vice News Tonight, or I would like this to be in the long read section of The Guardian. And then you ring up the switchboard of that company and you say, who commissions? And they will give you the name, or maybe they won't. But you plug hard at getting a name and not a general email address, and you send them an email and you say, hi, this is me, I'm great, and I've got this great idea, and this person's agreed to talk to me, you should commission me. And for a long time, people will say, that's very nice, go away. And then eventually somebody will say, we'll give you a chance. And it's not easy being a freelancer. That part of the reason why I do so many things is because you can't make a living off, well, maybe you can, but you have to have a portfolio career to make a living, certainly at the beginning. But it's an incredibly rewarding way to live because you're only ever doing stories that interest you, and you're having experiences that money couldn't buy. Like the richest person in the world couldn't have some of the experiences I've had. So I love it. Okay,
for sure. We have a follow-up question related to that, which was, how did you support yourself logistically? Like, how did you pay for your rent in order to
That is a really good question.
5 years.
So there's two.
When it's the
Yes. So I wasn't only working on this for 5 years. I had a baby during that 5 years time span. So there are two things that I support. Well, several ways I supported myself logistically. With the actual book, when you write a non-fiction book, the way it works is you write a proposal for a book, and you send it to a publisher, and you get an advance. So you get an advance on your royalties that you don't have to pay back. And that's kind of like venture capital investment. They're investing in you. You don't have to pay it back. They're hoping that your book will sell. If it doesn't, then you won't get that much money for your next book if you get to write a book at all. So I had an advance, but I got paid a quarter of the advance on signing the contract and a quarter of the advance on delivering the book. So I had to live off a quarter of that money while I was writing it, which wasn't very much. So I had to hustle. And then what I did was I wrote a few articles for places that could afford to pay my airfare to fly over to the US. I did some reports for different outlets that had budgets that could send me there. But then while I was there, I did extra bits of reporting. I was as resourceful as I could. I slept on people's couches. I lived very cheaply when I was paying my own way. And I stretched things as much as I could, but I also had to do other work at the same time in order to sustain myself. And sometimes the work that's lucrative is not necessarily the work that's interesting. But actually, the further on I've got in my career, the more I've been able to make a living out of doing what I really want to do.
Fabulous. And then Samia had a related question. We're getting into just like the logistics of how to be a freelance writer, completely unrelated to like tech or whatever, but just tell us, how did you choose your publisher? Is it purely just based on the numbers of like the advance that they're going to give you? Also, you said you got a quarter of advance when you initially, and then a quarter when you published it. Where did the other half go?
So I got a quarter when this came out, and when the paperback comes out, I'm getting the final quarter.
Nice. Okay.
So that's how it works. But sometimes you get it in third. How do I choose my publisher? I have a really great agent who chose which publishers to submit it to. And actually, the publisher who I have a book deal with, it wasn't just about the money. It was the perfect publisher for me because it's a publisher that publishes my heroes, my journalistic heroes. I don't know if you know a guy called John Ronson. He's a British journalist. He's a really
he's so good.
He's so good.
The Psychopath Test. I just finished that book like 3 days ago. He's a fabulous writer.
He's fabulous. So John Ronson is published by Picador, and John Ronson's agent is his editor is Chris Doyle, and Chris Doyle is my editor, and Picador is my publisher. So you pick a publisher to do with how much they get you and what you want to do, and how much they have their vision of your book is the same as yours. But yeah, I would say for all you guys who want to go into tech, it's probably a lot more lucrative than going into journalism. Who knows? Maybe you can do both.
Okay. Wow. This is super. This is great. We have a recent follow-up question from Taylor. Are there? Can you touch on experiences that you've come by as a journalist, like especially in the 5 years perhaps that you were writing this book, like when you were flying out? What also, I'm curious, didn't make it into the book? I'm sure besides the pictures that you got to share with us, what are some of the aspects that you wish you would have included otherwise? Well, there
was things that didn't happen that very nearly happened that I found that were heartbreaking. Like I didn't get to see the lambs growing in the bags. I didn't get to see them in person. I got access to the Children's Hospital Philadelphia. They all said I could come. The press office said I could come. And then the legal department at the last minute said I couldn't come. I was literally, I had my flights booked and I couldn't go. But actually that didn't really matter. And it became quite an interesting part of the story of, why didn't they want me there? And it's because they're trying it. They don't want anything that could jeopardize FDA approval. They don't want journalists kind of asking questions at that stage. Gosh, I've done some amazing. I've been very fortunate. I have been lost in the middle of the Amazon doing a story about how indigenous people there are getting malaria because of gold miners going in there. I interviewed Taliban commanders in Afghanistan. I've been all over Africa. I've had a really, really charmed life. That's from the sort of TV stuff I've done. So yeah, it sounds very glamorous and interesting. It actually is. It's very interesting. It's not glamorous. It involves you roughing it a lot. And sometimes I wish I had become a journalist that specializes in reviewing luxury hotels, particularly as I get older. But no, it's a real privilege.
Wow. Okay. Fabulous. Jenny, it's been like such a pleasure to host you. This is like super insightful and really exciting. One last question I had, which is just, what frightens you most? Not necessarily of the 4 technologies that you highlighted and the developments that you highlighted, but what frightens you most that keeps you up at night?
Honestly, what frightens me most is having messed up an opportunity to ask the right question or to have been bold when I was given the opportunity. Because a lot of people have, a lot of the stuff that I've done, and particularly, I just talk about things like I have done reporting in hostile environments where I've interviewed dangerous people, armed people in Honduras and Nigeria, and I've been in dangerous situations. And it might seem that you're brave to put yourself in those situations, but actually, I am spurred on by a fear of having not gone as far as I need to get the answers that I want, or having chickened out of asking a really direct question that might be really difficult to ask, but it's the one that I really want to ask. And I've learned that through experience. Early on in my career, I would sugarcoat things maybe, or dress things up, or chicken out of asking direct questions. So what keeps me up at night is having missed opportunities. But other than that, in terms of technology. I worry that we are all assuming that certain principles of capitalism, which are that human beings are intrinsically selfish and self-interested and greedy, are because there isn't a viable challenge to capitalism at the moment on the table for people to vote for and look at. We assume that capitalism is the thing, and capitalism takes a very dim view of human nature, and it's one that I don't buy. I actually think the vast majority of human beings are really good and altruistic and just want to live their life with dignity and aren't intent on exploiting people, and that actually we can make huge sacrifices for the benefit of other people. We can be altruistic and look after other people. And so that worries me, that we're living in a very cynical world. And, the political developments in the US and the UK really worry me. But I think we grow and change, and these are just temporary things, I hope.
Here. Me too. I like that. That could be a little slogan. Capitalism. I don't buy it.
Yes. I like it.
This has been such a pleasure, Jenny. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. I appreciate your time, your attention, your thoughtfulness. I'm so excited to listen to the book. And we hope to have you back on next year as you tell us about whatever you're exploring next, because I'm sure it's going to be really, really great.
It's been a total pleasure. And I'm on Twitter at Jenny Kleeman. You can contact me there. It's been really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And we'll be continuing with team-led group discussions in just 5 minutes. So stay tuned for the Slack. That's impactlabs.io/Slack for you to join. And then we're going to be closing the Impact Summit 2020 with a final talk with Marina Nitsa, who is the former CTO of the Department of Veterans Affairs here in the US. We're so excited, and I'm going to end the broadcast now, and we'll see you guys in the